Picture this, a misty fjord at dawn, longships slicing through the icy water, their dragon prows cutting a path towards history. We all know the Vikings as fierce raiders, but have you ever wondered what truly drove them from their Scandinavian homelands to terrorize Europe? Was it just bloodlust and a love for plunder? Or was there something deeper, something more complex and even mysterious at play? Today, we're peeling back the layers of history to uncover the real reasons behind the Viking Age. The story is far more fascinating than you might think. Let's start back in Scandinavia. In the late 8th century, life was tough. The land in places like Norway was rugged and mountainous, with very little fertile soil for farming. As the population started to grow, this created a huge problem. There simply wasn't enough land to go around. This led to what historians call a youth bulge. Younger sons, who wouldn't inherit the family farm, were left with a stark choice: stay and face a life of poverty, or seek their fortunes elsewhere. For these ambitious young men, the sea wasn't a barrier. It was a highway to opportunity. The allure of adventure and wealth abroad was a powerful magnet, pulling them away from the limited prospects at home. This pressure was compounded by a unique social and political structure. Viking society was incredibly competitive. A leader's or a jarl's power wasn't just inherited, it had to be constantly proven, and the ultimate status symbol, wealth, specifically silver. To attract loyal followers and maintain their authority, jarls needed to be generous. They had to provide their warriors with weapons, food, and most importantly, riches. Raiding became the primary engine of this economy of prestige. Successful raids brought back not just portable wealth like silver and gold, but also glory and reputation. A warrior's honor was tied to his success in battle and the wealth he brought home. This cultural value system created a self-perpetuating cycle. The more you raided, the more respected you became, and the more power you could command. But where to find this wealth? The Vikings were strategic. They didn't just sail off randomly. They had heard tales of the lands to the south and westlands that were rich, but also politically fragmented and vulnerable. The Anglo-Saxon kingdoms of England, for example, were often at war with each other, their defenses focused inward rather than outward. And then there were the monasteries, dotted along the coastlines of Britain, Ireland, and Francia. These were the banks of the medieval world. They were filled with gold chalices, silver relics, and other precious objects. Critically, they were also undefended. The monks who lived there were men of peace, not warriors. For the Vikings, these monasteries were the perfect targets. High reward, low risk. The infamous raid on Lindisfarne in 793, often seen as the start of the Viking Age, wasn't just a random act of violence. It was a calculated strike on a soft, wealthy target. Now, let's add another layer to this: religion and revenge. The Vikings were pagans, worshipping gods like Odin and Thor. At the same time, Christianity was aggressively expanding northward from continental Europe. Charlemagne, the powerful Frankish emperor, had been waging brutal wars against the pagan Saxons on the border of Denmark, often forcing conversions. News of these violent campaigns would have undoubtedly reached Scandinavia. So, when the Vikings began raiding Christian monasteries, it wasn't just about the gold. For some, it was a form of retaliation, a strike against the encroaching Christian world that they saw as a threat to their own culture and way of life. It was a form of cultural self-defense. Their attacks on these holy sites were deeply symbolic, a direct challenge to the power of the Christian God. Of course, the Vikings wouldn't have been so successful without their incredible technology and military tactics. The star of the show was the longship. This vessel was a masterpiece of naval engineering. It was long, narrow, and light, with a shallow draft. This meant it could not only survive the treacherous North Sea, but also sail up shallow rivers, allowing the Vikings to strike deep inland, far from fortified coastal towns. Their speed and maneuverability enabled the classic Viking tactic, the hit-and-run raid. They would appear seemingly out of nowhere, attack with brutal efficiency, and be gone before any organized defense could be mounted. They were masters of psychological warfare, using their fearsome reputation to intimidate their enemies. Sometimes, the mere sight of a Viking fleet was enough to make a town surrender without a fight. They also used the terrain to their advantage, setting up ambushes and employing siege tactics like surrounding a town and cutting off its supplies to starve it into submission. But here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. The Viking Age wasn't just about raiding, it was an evolution. Over time, the Vikings began to realize that raiding, while profitable, was also risky and unsustainable. Why keep raiding a place when you could control it and benefit from its resources year-round? This is when raiding began to shift towards settlement and conquest. Large Viking armies, like the Great Heathen Army that landed in England in 865, were no longer just looking for quick plunder. They came to stay. They conquered vast territories, establishing their own laws and rule in what became known as the Danelaw Law in England. They founded cities like Dublin in Ireland, which became a major Viking trading hub. This transition from raider to ruler shows their incredible adaptability. And with settlement came another major shift, from plunder to trade. The Vikings were not just warriors. They were also incredibly skilled merchants and explorers. The same ships that carried them on raids also carried them on vast trade expeditions. They sailed south to the Byzantine Empire, where they were known as the Varangians and even served as the emperor's personal bodyguard. They traveled east along the rivers of Russia, trading with the Abbasid Caliphate in the Middle East. You can find Viking-era coins from Baghdad in hoards buried in Sweden. They became the great connectors of their time, creating a vast trade network that linked diverse cultures and economies. They traded furs, amber, and walrus ivory from the north for silver, spices, and silk from the east and south. This economic activity ultimately became more stable and profitable than raiding, and it fundamentally transformed the European economy. What's truly mysterious and often overlooked is the sheer scale and speed of their expansion. How did a relatively small population from Scandinavia manage to have such a profound impact on the entire known world? Recent archaeological discoveries suggest their navigation skills were even more advanced than we thought. Some theories propose they used special sunstone crystals that polarize light to locate the sun even on overcast days, a kind of ancient GPS. There are also hints of a sophisticated information network, where reports from initial raids provided crucial intelligence for later. Larger invasions detailing political weaknesses and the locations of wealth. This wasn't just chaotic violence. It was coordinated and strategic on a level we are only just beginning to understand. So, the next time you see a depiction of a horn-helmeted Viking, which, by the way, they never wore, remember the real story. They were driven by a complex mix of economic necessity, social ambition, political instability, and cultural conflict. They were farmers, explorers, poets, and politicians as much as they were warriors. They were adaptable opportunists who responded to the pressures of their world by looking outward. Their legacy isn't just one of destruction, it's also one of creation. They founded cities, established trade routes, influenced languages, and even reshaped political boundaries. The Vikings didn't just raid Europe, they became a part of it, and in doing so, they changed the course of history forever. The truth behind their conquests is a story of survival, ambition, and adaptation on a truly epic scale. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this journey into the Viking Age interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments what historical mystery you'd like us to explore next. See you in the next one.